Well,
This is a
we're
good
all just
litmus
kind of ready
test.
now.
I know this is a good litmus test, though, for sure. I'm because now I know, like, because what I had already done leading into me doing this was I had set up my mic, put it on my desk, had the backdrop ready, and like sitting in the right. So I did all the hardware stuff,
Sure.
but I didn't do the software stuff. I should really do that on Wednesday.
Good to know.
It's good to know. It's good to know. It's good to know.
You live and you learn. And then you get
It's true.
Hey, look, it's getting late and I want to order dinner. So let's just get
No,
this
I know.
started.
I'm ready. I'm just want to click, click, click. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. 3, 2, 1.
Totem Talks was not filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Okay, yeah, I was anticipating something that was not singing a song.
Yeah, here's
say
the
that
thing,
much.
Nick. There is nothing I could do that would have accurately represented the music we're going to listen to today,
That's fair.
or that we've listened to today,
Right.
and we're going to talk about, or B, not towed the line between funny intro and horrifically like small-minded, like, bigoted point of view.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't want to be misconstrued.
I would hate to misconstrue you.
If I would have done some type of bullshit impression of either of our two artists today, in the year 2025, that would be a problem, as it should be, quite honestly.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't. I think we can leave
Nick,
that
you
stone
did.
unturned.
I do have to call you out, though, because as I mentioned before we went live, you're my quality assurance tester.
Yeah, of course.
And
I
you did
just found out, but
you corrected some issues. You corrected my name being wrong. You corrected the background being wrong.
okay.
But you didn't correct the top corner where this little guy belongs.
Because I never noticed that it's there, and you know that.
I know. For all our audio listeners, that's just the logo in our live stream. And also, why aren't you here in our live stream if you're an audio listener?
Also, who are you?
Yeah, also,
Are
really,
these
who are you?
episodes even being released?
They're all released on YouTube.
Oh, on YouTube. Okay.
They're all released on YouTube. Yeah,
That's cool. That's
when
cool.
when our entire last season that I did post was listened to by just us and your parents, I was like, nah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
If our YouTube channel picks up at all, I'll throw them all.
Sure.
I'll edit them all and throw them all on.
Yeah,
but
fine by me.
The sheer amount of editing I was doing for just us to re-listen to it,
I hear you.
is too much.
Too much.
Anyway, welcome into another episode of Totem Talks. And honestly, we just established that you're not there, but I will continue to act as if you are. We're a music-based podcast where we are determining the greatest musical artist of all time.
That's right.
We will leave no stone unturned. We will leave no continent untraveled.
Yeah.
If the greatest musical artist of all time lives in Antarctica, we'll be there.
Absolutely.
I would love to see a singing penguin.
Yeah.
I would love to see some type of singing. I mean, really, the only two choices then are some type of like Arctic creature or Kurt Russell from The Thing, right?
Well, it could be. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's in Antarctica, right? It's got to be.
What that took place in Antarctica, didn't it?
It had to, right?
I feel like it had to. I don't know.
I think so.
If anybody can fact check that for me, says the guy sitting at a computer. Either way, here's what we did this week.
Okay.
We took our talents on the road. Quite honestly, we went international. In a fun little preview of things to potentially come, we have gone completely off of formula here and covered two artists very different from each other, and B, music we've listened to previously.
Correct.
I think the closest we would have come to this is when we covered Bjork, maybe.
Well, I mean,
in terms of
we've definitely covered artists who weren't from like the UK and the US and Canada.
Yes,
So
but I'm
both, like,
talking about like in terms of like a drastic difference to our
yeah,
listening.
you're
I
right.
think the closest might be not that they're comparable to Bjork,
No, not at all.
just in terms of the fact that it's like very
Okay.
different from what we would
Yeah.
consider like typical music.
Hmm.
All that to say, Nick, how are you?
Great. I'm so
Good.
glad that you asked. And you're well as well, I hope.
I'm well as well.
That's
I'm
great.
I'm right as Rain Man.
Perfect. That's
And
that's
not
what I
right
wanted.
as Rain Man, right as
Yeah,
Rain, comma,
comma.
man. I was referring to you
That's
as man.
important. Thank you.
All right.
Well,
I think we've covered all of the semantics of the episode.
correct.
So, with that all being said, Nick, who in fact are we covering today?
We are kicking things off with Nigerian music legend Fela Kuti. And then we are moving on over to the Indian subcontinent to cover Ravi Shankar. So,
Very interesting stuff. Two very different artists.
to say the least.
Yeah. So, I guess without any further ado, I will get us started with Fela Kuti. So, I am sorry in advance. I'm going to do my absolute best here. Fela Anikulapo Kuti, who was born Olufela Olusegun Oludotun Ransome Kuti, was a Nigerian musician who was active from 1958 until he passed away in 1997. And we covered three of Mr. Kuti's albums.
That's right.
We started with the 69 Los Angeles Sessions, also known as Fela Fela Fela, which was released in 1970.
Mhm.
We followed that up with Gentleman, which came out in 1973. And then we closed things out with Underground System, which came out when we did in 1992.
That's right. Excellent. And Fela was my artist, so we're going to get started here with the 69 Los Angeles Sessions. And I got to give a little backstory to it. So basically, at this time, Fela and his band were in the United States. They played like a 10-month residency in Hollywood.
Okay.
And during that time, he would like this also kind of influences where we'll see the music go. He learns a lot more about U.S. politics. He gets kind of in with the Black Panther Party in L.A. there at the time.
Sure.
And that's going to really kind of influence the way he thinks. But then immigration was tipped off about the band, and it was possible that they were, overstaying their visas at the time. So very, very quickly, they're like, let's try to record an album here, and then head home and get out of here. And what you get from this album is something that's very different. So as someone who like listens to a lot of Fela, this album is very different from his other records in the sense that we have like a large number of shorter songs.
Yeah.
Like songs that are 4 or 5 minutes, when what I'm used to is, each song being like half the side of the album. Which
Yeah.
is what most of his
We'll
output
talk
is
about
like.
his other two albums. Don't you
so
worry.
so that's definitely like an interesting difference to hear right off the bat. But what's obvious is that the band kills. Like you
Yeah.
can hear that they've been playing probably like these every night gig residencies for 10 straight months, and they are locked in on these songs. They sound great. You can hear in some of these lyrics the politics definitely creeping in. He had shortly before this renamed the band, which he does several times over the course. But he renamed them Nigeria 70, kind of getting involved with his black activism stuff in Hollywood. But the grooves are so tight. The rhythm section is just like so locked in. And you get killer horn sections, like some really nice soloing from Fela. And Fela does play several different instruments on all of his records. So it's kind of cool to see the way people move in and out of the solo spotlight on a lot of these songs. Just he sounds like nothing else that we've ever covered, and like no other artist that I've really ever listened to.
Yeah. Listen, man. I want to start a little bit with just a general education for people who maybe aren't familiar with the style of music. So this is a style of music that is called Afrobeat music. And the thing that I think it's almost like jazz in terms of it does pull from jazz influence, but I mean
Yeah,
in terms of the thing that makes it good or bad is how complex you can make the rhythms.
sure, that
Like
definitely is
I know
for sure.
jazz also is more like if you got to really mess with the keys and the chord progressions and stuff,
I
but
think every good band that you listen to is gonna have a good rhythm section, but like
true.
here, really, like
So it's very important to the music itself that the rhythms are layered and complex.
sure,
And I think that Fela and the band do like as you mentioned, and because I'm not going to harp too much on this album, but because they were playing that 6 nights a week residency on Sunset Boulevard, they're just ice cold together. They are
yeah,
so locked in. It is insane. I don't think they could mess each other up at this point, really, is what it
right,
felt like and is how strong it felt. And it was very interesting to listen to. It's again, it's a style of music that I am fascinated by because as somebody, if you just casually listen to this, it's going to sound good and fun.
yeah, oh,
But
totally,
if you like really listen to it and you're just like, how are they all together doing this? And with that being said, I'm going to move into the second album. I'm going to move into Gentleman because here is where you get to ask the second question. How did they just do that for 15 minutes?
hmm
Because these three songs, this is a 3 song album. It's over 30 minutes
right,
long. And each song is the least the shortest song is 8 minutes. The longest one is the A side, which is Gentleman, the title track, and it's 14 and
yeah,
a half minutes long. And this is just another thing where there's like really complex rhythms happening. There's movements happening, like both movements to the piece itself, but also movements to the rhythms. And it just feels so built. And even though
yeah,
there is very rarely lyrical moments, there are like chants that happen, and you'll hear like some call and response chants,
hmm
but it's not lyrics in the way that we're used to just hearing like a
sure,
lead singer
yeah,
singing a lead line. It's not, this is not how it's
hmm
done in this style.
right,
But it's really interesting stuff. Again, this is a genre that I would listen to way more commonly as a music critic and like somebody who listens to music than I would just like throw this in the background. Although,
hmm
as Nick and I were talking about, like I do love to listen to instrumental style music when I'm reading because I can't listen to music with lyrics.
as do I.
But just really enjoyable stuff. Fela is once again out of his mind in a good way and just has just this tight knit group of people working together, which I think is just what
Yeah,
really elevates it.
for sure. So this album was my intro to Fela. This was the first one by him I ever heard, probably like 3.5, 4 years ago at this point, and it was pretty much an instant fall in love moment. And I've been listening to a ton of his stuff ever since. Definitely a favorite record of mine. Um, and I think you can definitely start to notice the cross pollination between Fela's music and American artists who are definitely listening to him and he's listening to them, like Sly and the Family Stone, Electric Miles stuff. Like it's kind of interesting to hear how it's still like very uniquely African, but it's also obvious that some of these more um I don't know if this is overstating it, but more like revolutionary style black American artists are clearly listening to what's going on in his records as well. And I think everybody benefits from that. The energy is just amazing on these records. I love his backing vocalists. They're locked in just like the rhythm section. The soloists always serve the song really well. And the title track. So you mentioned that the style of lyric is very different in these, but what I've definitely come to notice even more and more doing my research this week is if you read up on any of these albums or any of these songs, the story starts to come in, the politics becomes a lot more clear. So for instance, this particular album, the title track Gentleman, is really all about what Fela was calling the colonial mindset. Basically, he was criticizing other Africans who are like anglicizing or francicizing, if
Sure.
that's word. But like like just taking on the culture of the European countries that colonized them, and kind of forgetting about African traditions and culture and letting that go by the wayside. So, and that was a very important issue to him throughout his career, and like keeping African culture and identity alive was something that was really important to him.
Awesome.
And then we get into Underground System. So this is the longest record here, and there's a reason for that actually. Um, because I think also because this is 1992, it's his last recorded work alive. They had more space on the CD, but like there are a couple of tracks on here, like Panza Panza, he'd been playing since the 70s, but hadn't recorded on anything officially. And the third track,
Confusion Breakbones.
I'll come up with Confusion. Yeah, that's it. Confusion Breakbones was also released on like other records before that. So I think maybe they were just utilizing the space available to them on the CD. Um, but this is another very political album, like the Underground System. And I don't want to get fully into all of African politics and the history of colonialism and all this other stuff to like. It would take a long time to do justice to all of his politics,
Sure.
to be fair. Um, but a lot of it has to do with his concerns with political corruption or who is really controlling certain people in charge. He had been friends with a politician at the time, who ended up getting assassinated, and like largely that underground system, those maybe Africans with more of a colonizer mindset, as well as the agencies from certain North American and European countries that may see, leaders in Africa or South America who believe in their own country and don't want to just make deals with the United States and Britain to steal all their
Yeah.
resources as a threat. So a lot of this album is about that. Um, so again, it's super political. It's got important messages. Fella has a lot of he's brave, um, and he has a lot of important things to say. I found that all of his albums, even the other ones outside of the ones that we covered that I listened to this week and throughout the year, um, really benefit from a little bit of digging, because the more you learn about the background of all of it, the more I really like and respect him, and the more I go back and re-listen and hear like, oh, that's what he's saying when he's chanting that part. Like, this is what it's all about. Because, a lot of the stuff in the 70s and 80s was very topical, and it's maybe hard to fully understand the fights that he's fighting in
Yeah.
retrospect, especially if you're not, an expert on African politics. Um, but in terms of the music, again, I generally really, really like what he does. Maybe this one doesn't quite have the highs of the first two records, um, but it does definitely have some good parts. I think he was still experimenting. I think he was still pushing the boundaries of his sound at this point in his career. This is the first time we actually hear like acoustic piano parts and the use of a little bit more dissonance, when previously that was not really something that he played or put on his record. So um, it's probably not my favorite Fella album, maybe third of three for me today, but I still really like and respect what he's doing.
Cool. Listen, I'll say a couple things here. So, first off, Nick warned me prior to listening to this that I started a new job, and he knew that my listening would be a little different. And he's like, heads up, this album is over an hour long.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool. That's fine. That's fine. When I tell you that I made a playlist of Fela's albums so I could listen while working, I did not like really pay too close attention to the tracks in total until I got to this album. And I was like, oh, I'm finding the wrong album. There's only 3 tracks here. I had not
Yeah.
yet understood. And then I looked at the length and was like, oh, I understand now. This is
Oh yeah.
3 tracks long.
Right.
It's
Right.
over an hour. Okay. Anybody who's listened to me enough on this podcast
Mhm.
knows that that can be a problem for me sometimes.
Sure.
But I'll be honest with you, man. Like, I was really overall pleased with this album.
Warms my heart.
I think there was a couple things that really stood out to me. So, first things first, a lot of times when we're listening to songs that hit those double digit markers, whether they're in the prog space or the prog space mostly, I mean, that's where I'm
Metal
listening.
could be
Metal can get there, but when I'm really like,
Yeah.
usually if I'm listening to something that long, it's because you recommended me something in the
Sure.
prog space or something for this podcast.
Right.
And the overarching theme is they all kind of start a little slower and then build
Mhm.
throughout the song. It's a tactic that works. Do not
Sure.
mistake me.
Yeah.
Underground System comes out swinging right from the
Yeah.
beginning. It's like the rhythms are faster than we've really heard. I mean, we've heard a little bit,
Mhm.
but like the urgency right out of the gate was very interesting to me. I also like that in the first song we're getting some nice harmonic vocals, which we've had before, but it's just a pleasure to hear again.
Mhm.
And I was very into both of them. The other thing that we got to hear a little bit on, I believe it was Panza Panza. Again, a little hard for me to, because the songs are so long and
Yeah.
because I wasn't like watching the songs change. Because I was working, but I believe it had shifted to Panza Panza at this point. A lot of like really like cool piano moments,
Yeah. Mhm.
which
Yeah,
was awesome.
it's actually the very end of Underground System and the beginning of Panza Panza both use the acoustic piano. And
Okay.
so I heard it the first time, like, oh, that's different.
Yeah,
And then it came up again at the beginning of the other one. I was like, no, really?
it
Okay, he's doing
was
this a couple times.
very interesting stuff. So all in all, I mean, I liked it. I will say, like, if I was just listening to these, it might have gotten a little long for me, who is
Sure.
not somebody who typically listens to this kind of stuff. You know, if I was not also like working and like doing this for
Sure.
the podcast, I probably would have switched off.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I wasn't able to. I'm glad I was forced to listen to this because it was a good listen all the way through, which
Yeah.
for me to say for an hour plus long album of 3 songs is
Sure.
the highest praise I could possibly give.
It truly is. It truly is. And I'm very glad that we're here coming into the fact section. So I've got a lot of like story to tell. So I'm going to try to knock out the ones that I can do that don't just like include me telling a lot about his life. So
Yeah.
one thing is going to be the unique thing, I think, just has to be the Afrobeat. I mean, he coined the term. It's the style of music here. It is a combination of funk, jazz, high life, which is an African style of music, salsa, calypso, and also traditional Yoruba, which is the, I guess, tribe within Nigeria that Fela belongs to.
Am I just I just have to call one funny thing out to me.
Sure.
This is not a knock on Fela Kuti
Of
at
course.
all. I find it a little funny that he, in a lot of his, songs and a lot of his release stuff, is talking about how he absolutely is against the melding of European culture with African culture,
Sure.
but is totally fine doing it with music.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
find it so
I guess you know what
interesting.
it is, because think about this. All right, which of those were developed? Okay, funk and jazz, American, but invented by Black American artists.
Yeah, of course.
Salsa and calypso are from the islands.
Of course.
Probably a tradition from the indigenous people, as well as African slaves that were brought over, as well as European settlers. Probably mixes all those. But anyway, Afrobeat.
It's a good counterpoint.
It's it's an incredible style. It's used still to capture all of the artists that have come after Fella, um, and it's a pretty unique thing. Um, as far as 6 Degrees goes, I have a few of those. He actually played at Giant Stadium in 1986 for an Amnesty International benefit concert along with Bono and Carlos Santana. So that would have been a
Okay.
really interesting show to see. He has an album, a live album he put out in the early 70s with Ginger Baker. So, as great as
Wow.
Tony Allen is on the drums, imagine this band with Ginger Baker and also Tony Allen.
That's kind of nuts.
Yeah, it's a very cool record. I would recommend it. So that is another one, and then the last one I'll throw out there because I'm tossing over to you with this 6 Degrees. I'm sure we'll our paths will meet on this. In 2021, a documentary interviewed Paul McCartney about his life, and he said that he went and saw Fela live in Africa back in 1970. And he was quoted in regards to seeing that concert by saying, "The music was so incredible that I wept. Hearing that was one of the greatest music moments of my life." And yeah,
Yeah.
I totally get it.
I do think this is a type of music where all right. I'm gonna rattle myself a little bit here. I mostly because of the price of music venues and tickets increasing so exponentially due to like Ticketmaster and
Yeah,
third party sellers. I have had trouble in recent times in the last few years, like monetarily justifying going to see
sure.
live music when albums
Yeah,
and YouTube videos exist.
yeah.
It's one of
But
those
the
things.
experience of seeing Fela
And
live
I think that's what it
would,
like seeing a band like Fela Kuti's band would be the exception to the rule because of how fucking intense and complex all of these things are playing.
yeah,
Same thing that I think like I really do think that I would enjoy like that like Prague style music, like
mhm,
whether it's Prague or something in that vein,
yeah,
more live than I do
sure,
listening to it.
yeah.
And I know that
You're in the moment, the energy, the experience.
just watching people do it and not fuck up live,
Mhm.
or if they fuck up to make it into something like
Yeah,
it's so much like live music is so much more challenging than
mhm.
record. As somebody who's done both,
Sure.
like going out there and doing a live show is so much harder than recording something because there is no retake.
Yeah,
there
but
is no
right.
there is no like I didn't hit that note tonight. There's
Sure.
well, you didn't hit that note tonight and everybody heard you.
Yeah,
So like just from that standpoint.
sure. All right, let's see. What can I get into? How about some low light stuff?
Okay.
And then eventually I'm going to start tying everything that's left just together into a big story.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to include Fela's death
Yeah.
in 1997. Um, and it was heart failure due to complications from AIDS, is what
Oh,
is understood here. However, what's a bigger part of the low light is Fela was like an AIDS denialist. He like denied up until the end that it was AIDS, that he had AIDS. His widow also like continued to deny that it was AIDS up until and after his death. So that's a real shame. He was only in his late 50s.
yeah.
Um, he had a lot more music to make. It's very unfortunate. All unfortunate all around. And I also want to talk as maybe part of his highlight, and this after this I'll just kind of jump into the story part of this is his legacy, like the kind of things that have happened after his death. So there was enough interest for Universal to remaster and release 45 of his albums on CD after his death. Um, there's been since 1998 the Felibration, which is a giant party festival that celebrates his life in music every year. That's been going on for
That's awesome.
27 years at this point. Yeah. And there was also, I don't know if you know about this, because this is something that's available to listen to. Something that started as an off-Broadway musical about his life that's also like sort of a jukeboxy type deal
Okay.
and has a bunch of like 2 to 4 or 5 minute versions of his songs. And it was so successful that it ended up getting onto Broadway at the Eugene O'Neill Theater with backing from Will Smith and Jay-Z. And it was nominated for 11 Tonys. So it was like very, very well received.
Wow. When was this? Was this what, the
This
early
was in like the early
2000s?
2000s. Yeah, there was actually even going to be a movie, and I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy who plays Mordo in the Doctor Strange movies was signed on to
Oh, yeah,
play
yeah.
Fella, but the project fell through, as a lot of those things do.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Okay. So now I'm going to get into the story. I told you about why he was briefly in the United States for the first record and how he ended up going home. Now, what you have to understand is the Nigerian Civil War went from 1967 to 1970. So he's coming home to the very ends of this war. And it doesn't go well. And there's basically a military government that is in charge of Nigeria for a long time thereafter. And Fela is very political, and he's also not super great at keeping his mouth shut.
I respect it.
Yeah, I love it. So he was actually arrested over 200 different times.
Wow.
Over the course of his life, because of the oppressive regime that was pretty much always out to get him. And one of the reasons, like right from the start, he was very independent, very outspoken. He basically kind of started his own commune in Nigeria, declared his republic like its own independent thing. And it was like all the band members lived there, their families, friends. They like literally even had a free health clinic on premises. They had a full recording studio where they made all their albums. Like this was where they lived to try to like have their good life within what was otherwise an oppressive military regime. But at the same time, like he was still releasing a lot of music that was critical of the regime.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pull some full quotes here from the Wikipedia article on some of this stuff. So in 1977, they released the album Zombie, which was one that was in contention for listening this week, but it's a longer album. It's more like 50 minutes, and I wanted to do a short one just for the sake of the length of everything.
Sure.
So he released Zombie, which was like a major critique of Nigerian soldiers. And the zombie was basically like the metaphor for how the Nigerian military was acting.
Yeah.
And it was a massive success. And the government was very, very upset. So they sent 1,000 soldiers to raid the Calacuta Republic, which was his commune. During the raid, Kuti was severely beaten, and his elderly mother, who was also the first woman to ever drive a car in Nigeria, she was like a major feminist leader.
Awesome.
Was fatally injured after being thrown out a window. The commune was burnt to the ground, and Kuti's studio, instruments, and all of his masters were destroyed.
Holy crap.
And Fela himself claimed that he would have been killed if it hadn't been for a commanding officer's intervention as he was being beaten to death. So after this happens, in the most badass move in the history of humanity, Fela has his mother's coffin delivered to the house of the general in charge of the government and releases an album called Coffin for Head of State. All about how they raided his fucking compound and killed his mom.
Wow.
Yep. Like,
I mean,
the most badass thing I can imagine.
That is so badass. Also, like, let's be real, knowing the little I know now about his mother, absolutely what she would have wanted.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I mean, what, like,
yeah, like I couldn't believe that paragraph when I first read it. And he released the second album called Unknown Soldier because the Nigerian government the official inquiry into what happened claimed that unknown soldiers had destroyed the commune and there was nothing they could do about it. So he wrote another whole album about that. So
like, it's so disgusting because like you always hear like there aren't good people and bad people. Like bad people think they're doing good. Bullshit on some stuff. Like bullshit. How can you think
sometimes
that's
you're just doing what's good for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that was like maybe a critique of him was his polygamy, as in 1978, on the 1 year anniversary of his commune being attacked and burned down, he married 27 women at the same time, which is also unique. Now,
Yeah, it's pretty unique. Jesus Christ.
so, however, when you do read a little bit more into it, not only was it like trying to publicize the anniversary of the attacks, but it also, because of the legal situation in Nigeria and how the laws worked there at the time, allowed those women who were like living with him on his commune legally to stay there. And it didn't give it took away the Nigerian government's like legal cover right for abducting people off of his compound and trying to arrest everyone who was involved with him. So while it is weird, and like there was like a 12 wife at a time rotation thing that was going on, it was weird. Um, he did eventually divorce them all, after one of his longer arrests, where he finally decided that it wasn't fair to do that, and it should just be like a more of a one v one deal. Um,
So he divorced all 27, or he picked
yes.
one?
Well, I don't know for sure if he divorced all 27 of those and married a new one, or divorced 26 of those other wives, but um, that was the thing. But again, it was also in legally to protect all of those people from what was going on, because obviously none of them were safe, based on the 200 plus arrests plus the murder of his mother and all these other things. Um, but obviously, like, that political activism does continue throughout his career. He also is harshly critical of apartheid. He has one album, Beasts of No Nation, that is largely critical of apartheid and has pictures of Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan with big, like, colored in red with devil horns on it.
Amazing.
So you got to love that. And like, he was, like, as we mentioned, like, very into African culture. He was a Pan-Africanist. He renamed the band from Nigeria 70 to Africa 70 to Egypt 80 at one point. And one of his sons actually still plays with Egypt 80 to this day, because he was really concerned that there was this separation between Egyptian culture and accomplishments in the African continent at
Okay.
large, and is like, no, 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 like, we should all be proud of this. This is Africa. Whatever
Yeah.
Egypt accomplished, whatever we accomplished in Nigeria, like, he wanted Africans to feel like they were united. And he was also a socialist, so as you can tell from the free healthcare that was provided in the Calacuta Republic.
Wow.
But one last thing that I'll say that's negative, and then I'll be done, is just quotes from Tony Allen. So I did mention Tony Allen was a longtime drummer, for Africa 70, and like an all-time great musician, as has been, like, a lot of people came out when
Yeah.
he passed away in 2020 to talk about him, including Peter Gabriel and Damon Albarn, who we've covered in Blur, but was also in Gorillaz. Like, Tony Allen worked with him on some stuff for Gorillaz, and Albarn had like a lot of really nice things to say about how he was like one of the greatest and a wonderful teacher. But Tony Allen did more than 30 albums with Fela, and then dissension kind of grew, and issues over royalties and recognition happened, and eventually Allen, feeling kind of slighted, as he actually said that he was the only person in the band who Fela didn't write the parts for. He basically, like, he came up with what everyone was going to do and said, Tony, you got this. So basically, like, to quote Tony Allen, he said, "What makes me decide it's time to go? It's everything." And his carelessness, like, he doesn't care, like, he doesn't know, he doesn't feel like he's done anything wrong. And with all the parasites around, there were 71 people on tour by now and only 30 working in the band. You got to ask why. Those guys were sapping Fela of his force, of his music. So that's what he had to say about how things were going at the band at one point. And
Yeah.
that's everything I have to say. I mean, I don't think his story could have been much crazier, so I think I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly. Okay. All right. Well,
All
I
right.
guess let's
Let's move
hop
on to
in.
Robbie.
Yeah. Whew.
Yeah, I did tell you it was going to get fucking wild.
It certainly does get fucking wild. Also, it's Chiwetel Ejiofor is Mordo.
Ah, yes. All right, I'm gonna pee real quick.
I was, yeah, you're good. You're good. Oh man. Oh man. Covering Ravi Shankar next. Nobody's here. I was going to ask how y'all doing tonight, but there's nobody here. There's never anybody here. Unless you're watching this on YouTube, and then how are you doing tonight? That's the real question. How's anybody doing? I mean, can we ever know? What do you think, Nick's headphones and microphone? Why don't you tell me? I love that because this is up. It looks like this is Ravi Shankar. Now it looks like I'm Ravi Shankar. Both are true. Both are true, everybody.
Okay, I'm back. And better than ever.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
All right.
I realized that because this is a name, if I solo your camera, because I was talking to your headphones and your microphone a little bit, it looks like you're Ravi Shankar.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, so it does.
So congratulations on the upgrade.
Thank you.
Certainly would upgrade your sitar playing skills, I think.
My God.
Although you're probably better than he is now.
Well, I mean, that's fair. I agree.
But in the overall, it would definitely elevate your your sitar playing skills. I think you could look at a sitar and make music-ish happen.
I think you're right. I'd have to work at it. I wouldn't be good, but
no, I mean like you could like right now.
Yeah,
I'm saying like right now you could get a sitar. You could be given a sitar because I think you know enough about like sympathetic strings and like enough to make music happen. Whether or not you'd play it correctly at all, I don't think so. But
no,
you know, I'm giving you the credit you're owed there.
I appreciate that.
All right, I'm ready.
Yes, good. 3, 2, 1.
Ravi Shankar, born Rabindra Shankar Chowdhury, was an Indian musician, sitarist, and composer.
That's right.
And he was active for a long time, 1930 to 2012.
That is a long ass time.
That is such a long time. So, I mean, kudos on the career as we start. I guess we'll keep going here. We covered 3 albums from Ravi. I should also mention former member of parliament in India, Ravi Shankar.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes, so that is a thing that happened. So, we covered 3 albums. We started with 1956's 3 Ragas. And we'll delve a little bit into a raga as we start here.
Sure.
We'll follow that up with Improvisations from 1962. And then we close things out with a tag team album, a collab with Philip Glass called Passages.
Yes.
And that came out in 1990. So those are the 3. And Ravi was my artist this week. So we'll start with 3 ragas. Now, before we delve into the music, obviously we're dealing with Indian music.
Right.
And so I think it's very important to at least talk about ragas.
Mm-hmm.
So a raga is not like a song type.
Right.
The closest thing I think we have to it in music, in our style of music, is like a mode.
Modes, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because I actually looked up the steps. Like, for instance, the first raga on this album is like the 1, 3, 4, 5 flatted 7.
Yeah.
And then also 5, 4, 3, 4 flatted 3 on the way down. So sort of like how a melodic minor scale in Western music changes whether you're playing it up or down.
Which is a lot of the things that, you know, I'm jumping ahead of the gun.
Okay.
So a raga is a mode, and a mode, for anybody who doesn't know, is like like a framework of a melody. It's like the structure of notes that
Yeah.
you know you're playing in a mode. And a raga is the same way. It's different than a key because a key is basically where you start on that.
Hmm.
It's a whole, I'm not going to talk about all the music
Okay.
stuff,
Sure.
but that is the very bare bones of what a raga is. So you know, a raga is getting you into a certain structure to play a song. And then how you play in that song is how you perform the raga.
Hmm.
So we got three of them on this album, as mentioned. So three ragas. This is honestly pretty similar to Fela Kuti in the fact that it's three tracks, and this is a
Right.
55-minute album.
Hmm.
So we're dealing with large scale songs here. The opening track, Raga Jog, is 28 and a half minutes. And here's the thing, there's no lyrics, there's no singing, really. It's all mainly the sitar is the star instrument, although there's plenty of instruments
Yeah.
playing. I would say that one of the things in Indian music that is very interesting to me is like the way there's almost like a droning,
Yeah.
constant underbeat.
Yeah. It takes up the space, like way
Yes,
more than you would expect from the amount of instruments playing. It fills the space.
correct. It's just your ear is constantly being tickled by something,
Hmm.
and it's that undercurrent. Whereas when we covered Fela, it was all about the complex rhythms. For for Ravi in this album, it is very much like building upon these ragas and concepts, and you can hear the sitar start to like the movements of the sitar as you go.
Hmm.
You're hearing this underground, this underdrone, this undercurrent of music, and it just creates this full sound for you to experience.
Yeah.
This is a style of music that I think even more so than the Afrobeat will sound distinctly foreign to the American
Sure. Yeah.
ear.
I agree.
And it puts you right in the correct region of the world.
Sure. Yeah.
I think Indian music has been played enough in culture now that, and Ravi Shankar is a huge part of that, which we'll talk
Yeah.
about. But it's played enough now that I think most people would hear it, and especially the sitar, and know you're in or around India.
Yeah. Or in a Courage the Cowardly Dog episode,
Yes,
Muriel played the sitar, if you recall.
I do recall that. I do recall that. One of two sitar players that I know.
Yeah. Exactly.
The other one is Ravi Shankar.
Exactly.
But again, just phenomenal playing.
Hmm.
Like phenomenal playing. Ravi Shankar. It's hard to talk about how influential he is, and we'll get more into it. But he is like almost synonymous with the sitar.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And that's a worldwide thing. That's not just in India. Like
Hmm.
worldwide, he is synonymous with the sitar in the same way that Jimi Hendrix is synonymous with the guitar.
Sure.
It's like that level for anybody who doesn't know.
Hmm.
And I just think that there's something so intriguing about these three ragas when you're listening to them. It's different. You're not really getting, like, you don't really get the story. There's in all the music we listen to, and even in Fela stuff, as you mentioned in your storylines, like there's specific stories and words and messages. These passages, like this album, is all about like making you feel an emotion based on the music that's playing. It's only the music that's playing. It's way more similar to like classical music in terms of like it's just taking you on a
Yeah.
journey.
I mean, it is considered Hindustani classical.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. So all that to be said, it is a fascinating listen and a very, very enjoyable one.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed this. Again, like while I'm not nearly as into Ravi as I am to Fela, I have listened to a lot of Ravi stuff before. I've been aware of him because of the Beatles. I know you'll get into that, but
Yeah.
like this was also immediately apparent to me here. And it's either that sitar music sounds eerily similar to someone who is not educated on it at all, or I could hear that George Harrison like learned from him when I think of sitar and Beatles songs, I think like, oh yeah, like there's a lot. Like George was the pupil here, and he like learned a lot from what Robbie was doing. Um, Even in the third raga, Samendra Madhyam, I have no idea if I'm saying that right. Um, Early on in that, I felt like because vibes from the Beatles, and it just like harm in terms of the harmony there. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering to what extent even their songs that are less sitari were maybe inspired by harmonies in Indian music.
Yeah,
Um,
which we can talk very little bit about. I don't have too much in depth on that, but
mhm,
I have a little bit on that.
sure, but like I'm hearing how he's influenced the Beatles is what's clear to me in multiple songs here.
Mhm.
And one thing that you didn't mention that I just really like before I move on is you can hear a really strong contrast in the music. So it's there are three instruments on this record. Sometimes it's just Ravi on sitar, but when the tablas kick in, especially which are like the percussion instrument, you can really feel the change in the movement and the music that goes
Yeah.
with that. So I really like that. And then it brought us into improvisations from 1962. And I thought this was different because it was mostly a very different thing. While the second side of this record was three parts of a raga, the first half had improvisations over theme music that Ravi himself had written for a Bollywood movie.
Yes.
So he kind of like did a new version or improvisations over a piece he had already written for something totally different. It also included a song called Fire Night, which had guitar, bass, and drums on it. So it kind of included that more Western instrumentation.
And flute.
S- and flute. Yes, yes, there was flute on a couple of these tracks, which I thought like blended perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, but it was really interesting and different to feel this album versus the first one, just to see like how can Ravi be different when given different musical contexts. And I really again like this album a lot, and I thought that the shorter compositions, you know, they lent themselves to a lot. The building and excitement of the songs was all happening a lot more quickly here, as opposed to the space that he was giving it in the first record. So that was just like I like them both, but it was a difference, and it was interesting to hear that two different ways and two different albums.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree with you. I enjoyed the B side of this album with the
Yeah,
raga, the 3-part raga. It was very interesting and it was played exquisitely,
as
as was
much.
the first album. But the A side of this album really intrigued me because of how different it was.
Yeah,
The first song, you are getting a similar-ish sound because, as you mentioned, it was written for a Bollywood film. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. I
that's fine.
I do the names of the artists. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to mispronounce a bunch
Yeah,
of Bollywood and Indian words. That's just not. It would just be bad for everyone.
it would.
But it was, the improvisation over it was very interesting, and but it did sound very Indian influenced, and it was obviously hearing Fire Night specifically with how different it was to have those Western instruments come in was fascinating because like Ravi Shankar doesn't miss a beat over that.
No,
He's
not at all.
still playing the same stuff, and it sounds incredible. And it just adds a whole new layer that was very interesting to listen to. So I really enjoyed this album. So we're 2 for 2 so far with Ravi
Mhm.
Shankar.
Yeah, we're 5 for 5 so
We're
far
5 for 5 so
as a week.
far,
That's
which
great.
which was, listen, to be expected. Here's the one thing I knew going into this week. I knew that both styles of music we were going to be listening to require like precision.
Mhm.
They require like feeling and precision and technical ability. So I knew that we were going to be getting good music.
Yeah, well,
Whether it was enjoyable all the way through is different because, as has happened on the show with both of us many times, we can recognize that something is good and hard to do and they're talented and not like it.
sure.
So 5 for 5 in terms of all of the talent and stuff that goes into it, but also enjoying it.
Very much.
And so I'll take us into Passages with Philip Glass, The Chance for Perfection. Now, it is here where we should mention, with the exception of the alternate title of Fela's first album, we have no eponymous albums really,
Right.
which is a shame.
It
Although
is.
Fela did the 69 Los Angeles sessions did re-release as Fela,
Right.
so maybe there's a little bit there, but it is sad to not get either one. But Passages with Philip Glass is, when I say completely different than the first two albums, I mean it. This is chamber music, which is very different. It's the classical music that you would expect to hear. When I tell you classical music, it's that. That's what you're thinking about, is chamber music. When you hear whenever you're in like a TV show or something where they're all, like Bridgerton plays a lot of chamber music. Like anywhere where it's fancified, you're going to hear chamber music. But to hear chamber music as you are, with the Ravi Shankar touch to it, is absolutely fascinating. It's fascinating. The only thing I wish is they figured out a way to really make the sitar work in this chamber music. Would have been incredible. Ravi contributed in the writing and in a lot of other orchestration and performance, but unfortunately, no ripping sitar throughout these chamber music pieces.
Sure, no.
But this album was wonderful. Wonderful is the only, like, if you don't like classical chamber music, I would ask you to give it a chance, really give it a chance, because I feel like a lot of people just write it off as like stuffy and boring. But if you listen past like needing lyrics, and as somebody like
Oh yeah.
I fucking love lyrics. That's like my main thing in music. But if you move past lyrics in a song and like accept the fact that they're not there, the complexities of each individual instrument really sing to you. And on this, like, this is an album, which is what I did. I put it on, I sat down, and I read a book. And it just filled the room with like this excellent atmosphere. And this was my favorite album of the ones we listened to. Now, I recognize that part of that is because this, more than the other 5 albums, is music that I'm used to.
Sure.
So I recognize that. It doesn't change the fact that it's the one I enjoyed the most.
Yeah.
But I know why. But I do think that the thing that I like the most about this is these are 2 artists that I would never consider co-writing music together. So like just the sheer, like the shtick of it all was so interesting to me. And the fact that they made music that sounded so cohesive to both of them, because Nick, you, and I know you're going to mention that you heard the influence more, but I heard the influence of Ravi Shankar, even though, again, without sitar, it's hard for the average listener to be like,
Yeah,
oh,
it
that's
was in
Ravi.
there sometimes, but
It's in there sometimes, but it wasn't the star of the show.
Right.
Okay, go ahead. I know you have stuff to say on that as well.
Just to get everything out of the way, I don't know if you mentioned Philip Glass specifically as like one of the most prominent contemporary classical composers.
I just assumed people knew that, but you're absolutely right. You should say it.
Yeah, he's very, as far as like contemporary composers of classical music goes, he's one of the most famous of the last 100 years.
I would say definitely the most famous alive today. I mean,
oh yeah, okay, that's fair.
I don't know. Maybe Glenn Gould, is he still alive?
I have no idea. I don't think so. But I also really love this album. I think this is just, again, a completely different way to experience music that Ravi is writing. But it works so well. I could definitely hear the difference between their writing. I could hear the difference in how Ravi composed versus how Glass composes, because you could definitely hear elements of that like classical minimalism coming out in Philip Glass's compositions more so. The review for this actually the All Music review actually mentions like Steve Reich and Terry Riley, who I think we might have the two of them matched up on an episode a couple of seasons from now already.
Amazing.
As classical minimalist composers who were like influential in the 60s and 70s. But I totally get that because I like their records and I really like this a lot. And I think I even lean towards Ravi's compositions a little bit more, even though I liked what both composers had to bring to the table here. Again, basically, like you said, to sum it up, really great experience, totally different from the other 5 albums that we listened to. Really cool and refreshing to just cover a whole week where I feel like we're doing something we've never done before.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'll take us into some Ravi Shankar anecdotes. The unique thing. Call it a cop-out. I don't think it is. I have to go with it's extremely unique to have somebody achieve such worldwide influence on an instrument that most people wouldn't recognize if it was sitting in front of them.
Yeah, okay.
Like, it's very unique. Like, Ravi Shankar, like, name another sitarist. You're a musician. Name another sitarist. That's
George
not George Harrison.
Ed Helms in
Sure,
that one episode of The Office. at
So
Christmas.
that's what I'm saying. Like, it's an instrument that nobody recognizes players of. Like, if I told you to name a guitarist, you could name me 25 off the jump. And like 25 good ones off the jump.
Yeah.
If I told you to name drummers, if I told you to name bassists, if I told you to name piano players.
Yep, you're right.
But he is the sitarist of the world, and I think that's unique.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, cool. Moving on, highlight. There was a couple different choices here. Obviously, I mentioned that he was a member of parliament for Rajya Sabha.
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome. He served from 1986 to 1992. Just side questing at that point in his life, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting that we both musicians we covered had political leanings of a way. But the highlight that I went with, as soon as I can open my notes app, he was awarded the Bharat Ratna in 1999, which I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but it is the highest honor that a civilian can be awarded in India. So consider it like the Medal of Freedom in America.
Sure.
Like it's top of the line. And I just think that's got to be the highlight of somebody whose entire life was about basically promoting Indian culture and music on a global scale.
Yeah.
Winning that award. Lowlights we'll get into. I don't have anything for meanest or nicest because I just couldn't find things. Meanest can kind of tie in with the low light, I'll be honest with you. So maybe we'll go there. And obviously, some of the 6 degrees, but
yeah,
we'll go with that. So just real quick with the low lights. We'll start with his death. That is obviously a low light. He's no longer with us. He passed away in 2012. So right at the end of his career, as I mentioned, his years active. His death was he's 92 years old when he passed away. He passed away right after undergoing heart valve replacement surgery. He'd been complaining of shortness of breath, went to the hospital, needed emergency heart surgery, and did not survive. So that's a low light, obviously. The other kind of low light that I have for Ravi Shankar is tales of widespread infidelity, which is why it goes into some of the meanest as well.
Okay.
So in 1941, Ravi Shankar married somebody, Annapurna Devi, and they had a child together. He already started kind of having affairs. They weren't really well documented until his affair that happened in the 1970s, because he had an affair with somebody named Sue Jones, who 6 degrees of Totem Talks, then had a daughter named Nora Jones, who we covered, and who is Ravi Shankar's illegitimate daughter.
She's legit.
She's legitimate, but I'm saying in terms of it was through an affair, which is unfortunate. Yeah. He then separated from his, at the time, wife in 1981, 2 years after Nora Jones was born, still married, separated from her to live with Sue Jones until 1986.
Okay.
So that's one thing. Let's see. Other Yeah, that's basically the big one. That's the big one.
Okay,
That's the big low
fair enough.
light and meanest thing is the torrid affair that led to a child.
Who,
Rough.
also released some nice music.
Yeah, Nora Jones, wonderful
Which I
singer
guess that's something
and
that these
interesting
artists
songwriter.
both have in common. Like all of Fela's kids are musicians
Yeah,
as well.
that is true.
One of them
Yeah.
was playing at one of the was announced in one of the festivals recently.
Well,
Like
Fela's
it might
son
have
actually
been
took his spot, right, in the
right.
band.
It might have been Shehun
Yeah.
uh, Kuti with Africa 80 at
Yeah,
some.
well, Anushka Shankar, his daughter, was nominated for a Grammy in
Oh,
2003.
nice. Okay.
So, multiple children
Yeah.
nominated for Grammys because one of them is literally Nora Jones.
Right.
So moving on to the other 6 degrees, I already mentioned Nora Jones, obviously. But yeah, I just want to touch a little bit on Ravi Shankar's collaboration and influence on the Beatles.
Yeah.
So, and really very specifically the Beatles in general, but mostly George Harrison. George Harrison was introduced to Ravi Shankar's music by Roger McGuinn and Dave Crosby.
Okay.
So they were both big
Back in the
fans of
Byrds
Ravi
days.
Shankar. Yeah. They were both big fans of Ravi Shankar, and he became very influenced by Ravi Shankar's music. Olivia Harrison actually was quoted as saying, when George heard Indian music, that really was the trigger. It was like a bell that went off in his head. And the influence is so obvious. I mean, not only when George Harrison plays the sitar and you can hear the Ravi Shankar influence, but as you had mentioned, like throughout George Harrison's songwriting, he was so intrigued by like Indian culture and music that it was very prevalent in the way he wrote his harmonies, the way he wrote his music. You mentioned because he was very interested in using ragas in his songwriting, and so working in those chord progressions, which is maybe one of the reasons the Beatles were doing things so different from everybody else in music at the time.
Definitely played a factor.
Like, it's just very interesting. So, Ravi Shankar is widely credited with, starting the use of Indian instruments in Western music and specifically the sitar.
Yeah.
And his influence over the Beatles and George Harrison is really the catalyst for that.
For sure. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Is that the last fact then?
That's the last fact I had. Like I said, I didn't have any mean or nice.
Yeah. Okay. So then I think we go into grading.
Yeah.
And I think we go into like a very similar space for cultural impact, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Ravi is to the sitar in a lot of ways what Fela is to Afrobeat music.
Sure.
Both of them had cross-pollination with Western artists who are extremely famous and influential with the Beatles and like Miles Davis and Sly and the Family Stone. They both, I mean, like if you had to make what am I thinking of? It's a big statue. It's a big carving in a mountain.
Mount Rushmore?
That's it. If you had to make a Mount Rushmore of music for India, Ravi's probably one of the very first names that's coming up. If you had to make a Mount Rushmore for all of African musicians, Fela's probably one of the very first names that's coming up there. They're both undoubtedly on it. The average American maybe not really recognizing their names doesn't capture how incredibly impactful both of these artists are.
1,000%.
But I do think they end up in a similar place for the reasons that I have elucidated.
I think you're correct. I think they end up in a similar place. I would argue very, very slight edge goes to Ravi Shankar.
I think that's fair.
And I think it's really specifically his Beatles connection and influence. Like,
I think
anybody who's a fan of the Beatles of any capacity, even if you had no idea who Ravi Shankar was, then become aware of who Ravi Shankar is.
I mean, he was also playing these festivals too. Like he played. I mean, I know we're going to get to a Woodstock point for him. Obviously,
I'm talking.
Like he's playing these giant American festivals too. Like right in the heart of the late '60s.
1,000%. I was really talking about like the current today fan.
Yeah.
Like if I, you know, when artists are both so heavily influential as these two are, it becomes like who's more likely to have heard of them today and why.
Sure.
And I think, unfortunately for Fela, Ravi Shankar is more likely to be discovered
Sure.
today because he has a wider connection. If you are a fan of Nora Jones, if you are a fan
Oh, the
of the
Beatles.
Beatles,
Yeah.
you will eventually stumble onto Ravi
Yeah.
Shankar.
All right. What number are we thinking?
It's got to be high for both.
I think so too. I
I
think
mean,
we
it's
got to
got to
take
be.
our American bias out of it. We
Yeah.
can like, obviously, we're not going to give them tens because like we
No.
can, take apart the fact that they were, these people didn't necessarily have the popularity that they should have had in the U.S. And large swaths of Europe and Canada and all that other stuff. But I wouldn't be opposed to giving them numbers in like the sevens or something like that, unless
Yeah,
you were thinking it was higher than that.
I think my numbers that stuck out to me were a 7.5 and a 7.7.
I love it. I'm in. Look, both of these artists had so many albums that I'm not going to go through and try to distinguish which ones were live and which ones were
There's a
compilation.
bazillion of each.
The answer is they're both starting with the most possible points here because they both definitively had well over 31 studio albums. So each artist starts
Correct.
with a 6.7. And I'm going to make another bold claim here. Do what you will with this. I think the answer for both of these artists is, even though we can't really find reliable sales numbers, they were both two of the most popular artists in two very, very large places. And just because we don't have reporting statistics, I don't think we can take anything away. I think we might just have to leave it be for sales.
Hear me out. Hear me out.
Okay.
I don't necessarily disagree with your logic, but I think that doing that breaks away from a precedent we've set for other artists, like international. Like, we didn't do that for other artists. So I think the fair thing is, let's start them both at a 6.5.
Okay.
We'll take away a little bit because there's no sales data and there's no certifications.
Yeah, it just sucks because I don't think there's just reliable data for
Yeah,
what we're selling in
Mhm.
Nigeria or other countries in
Which is
Africa
why I
in the
don't want to take away
70s,
the
when a
full
lot of
half
the women
point
were
for
like,
sure. I would like,
yeah.
I know there's the potential for a half point to be taken away there. Absolutely not interested in that. I think that's too far. But I think a little dip is necessary, sadly.
Okay.
Now, what would you like to give Fela?
I am borderline between two numbers. And I think I'm going to do something that I haven't done
I thought
since
you
we
might.
have instituted this system of points. And I'm going to give him the full half point.
A true groundbreaking moment, never been done before
I
for
just
Nick.
I listen to his albums all the time.
Yeah.
I I know a ton of the stuff that we didn't cover and I really love all of it. Full half point.
I respect it, man. I respect it. I'm gonna give a 0.4.
Sure.
Nothing against it at all. Like, 0.4 is a very high score just in comparison to your half point. It's just I recognize that the length of song on this would wear on me a little bit as I continue to listen.
Sure.
And so that's it.
Although you'll definitely hear one more of these albums, I'm sure, before.
Yeah,
the end
no
of the season.
shit, dude. I know. I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise.
All right, Ravi. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give a 0.4 here, and it's for almost the exact same reason. The albums are incredible. The length, if I wasn't, depending on where I am, a 0.5 needs to be an album I can put on night, day, anytime, listen to it top to bottom and be in love with it.
Yeah.
This is not that I need to be in the right headspace, but when I'm in the headspace, this shit's incredible. So 0.4.
Yeah, I'm also going to give a 0.4. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Super high praise for me as well. Moving on to instrumental talent, I think these are both going to be really good scores.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we just Ravi is what a 10 on a sitar is. I think he just kind of automatically
Ravi has to get the 10 here because he is 100% synonymous with the instrument.
I just don't
he
think
is the gold standard of the instrument. There is nobody that you can compare as better than him on a global scale. I'm sure, just like there are conversations around guitar,
Hmm.
that as you get into India, where the instrument is obviously from and more common, there
Yeah.
are more debates on the subject. But from a global standpoint, nobody is beating Ravi Shankar in terms of talent or notoriety on the instrument.
Yeah, I agree. But I don't think we're slouching here for the grades for Fela in Africa
No.
70, or Egypt 80 or any other incarnation of the band. I mean, we like everyone who's playing in this group sounds great. They're really tight musicians. Fela at sac does saxophone solos followed by keyboard solos, and then he's playing several instruments on each one of these records himself as well, just to be clear on that. Tony Allen, as we discussed, is like an all-time great drummer, man.
Yeah.
Like he is genuinely incredible. So like I would definitely want to keep this score probably at least in like the 8 range.
I'm a little higher than that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is it is so fucking important in Afrobeat music to be precise and technically correct.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what's interesting? A lot of these performances and records, he had multiple bassists at the same time, but playing the same melodic bass line in sync to make it feel
Interesting.
bigger and to get that stereo sound. But they are like locked in.
That you
You do
have to be.
not hear that there are two bassists. Like you can
That's
hear the thickness of the sound, but not two distinct takes.
that like I don't think people can understand how absolutely incredible that is.
Yeah,
Like try to mimic anything
I know.
and you will not be 100% correct.
Yeah.
Like it's just that's crazy. Hearing that is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's his band.
Like I couldn't do that vocally.
No,
I couldn't
for
lock
sure.
in with somebody vocally
In
100%.
fact, you can hear a lot of that on like the early Beatles records, especially. And I think it's what part of what makes them great. But like I can hear John in my left ear and John in my right ear sound a little bit different
Yeah.
sometimes.
Wow. 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 Okay. Yeah, I think we're high eights to a 9. Easy.
Cool.
I mean, just in terms of the complexity of what's being played and performed here. And the fact that even though there is turnover in the band, which is why they're not getting the 10, I think the 10 is reserved for, you know, someone like Ravi, who is the gold standard, or
Sure.
a band that is had minimal turnover but maintained just the tightest of sound throughout. And
I'm gonna
they've
give
had
it an
enough
8.9.
turnover that they're losing it a little bit.
An
But yeah,
8.9
100%.
sounds really good
8.9
to
is
me.
great.
And I think songwriting is again another strong category for both of these artists. Ravi is not going to suffer. He's an excellent composer of Hindustani music, and his albums were all different. I do think that his writing comes from a less diverse place than
Sure.
Fela's, if you're going to compare them that way in terms of who is incorporating different genres and
Influences. Yeah.
influences. Like it's clear that Afrobeat is a little, you know,
But
broader.
is that at all mitigated by that third album, which is Ravi
Yeah, I don't
composing chamber
know.
music,
Yeah, which is again like
which is
it shows,
very
and
different from
it shows
Hindustani
his
classical.
skill, but it also showed Fela's skill when I was mentioning before, like other than Tony Allen's parts, which he trusted him with,
He
he was
wrote
also
everything. Yeah.
writing the arrangements for every instrument.
No,
But
yeah,
I mean, I
definitely no
think
knock on
again
Fela.
they're just both high scorers here.
They are just both high
They're
scores.
both like uniquely talented artists, and I think again we're probably going to have numbers that don't go under 8 here for both.
I think very realistically that's correct. I think I'm probably capping out at an 8.5.
Yeah,
And I think that's what we'll give Fela,
yeah,
because I do
I'm
agree
right
that
there.
he has shown a little bit more here. But I think Ravi is probably like an 8.3.
I'm with you. That
Yeah,
sounds
right
right.
up there. And it's the level of difficulty. It's hard to explain to anybody who doesn't really get music writing, but the difference in difficulty between writing the music that these two are writing and writing like your average to above average pop rock song is truly inconceivable. It really is. And like, as somebody who has written, like, not necessarily pop rock, but rock style songs, and you're the same way.
Mhm.
Like, yes, there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of figuring out the emotion and the progression and the sound. But we're at most writing for like 5 parts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm
Just
not
the
definitely
sheer
not writing
number.
anything on passages or anything that
Right.
Fella
Like,
does
there's a
on any
very
of his
big difference
records.
between writing a song
Mhm.
and composing a piece.
Yeah.
They're different things. It's the same way, like, I wouldn't say I'm I'm a writer. You know, well, I'm like, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm a writer, and what I'm writing is like pamphlets.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that to like Stephen King.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's what I'm saying.
All right, let's move on to this last couple of categories. I think there's points in both left. Poetic is the easiest one for Ravi because there are not lyrics in his songs. It's instrumental music. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's point one.
It's point one. Fela, I think, is a little bit more interesting because we're balancing like these are not traditional lyrics in the way that we're used to,
Not at all.
but they are also like super meaningful. And I don't want to just like plow over the style of writing that he is doing just because it's not what I am used to.
Sure.
Because
Here's my problem
Mhm,
with Fela. I know we are discussing lyrics
mhm.
when we talk about this. And whenever we cover it, it's about lyrics. But the title of the category is poetic talent.
It is
And here's the thing: the lyrics were meaningful in message and
very,
meaningful, but they were not
but
poetic.
yeah, they're like
It was,
repetitive. It's a lot about the
yeah,
delivery of it. Like I'm not saying we give him a high score here, but I'm just saying we're not giving him like a punk band came out where they just like had one line and they screamed it 4 times in a row and moved on to the next thing.
yeah.
Like it's higher than that
It's
is my
higher.
point.
It's higher than
Because
that.
it's
It
got
is.
like and every one of them clearly has a strong political message that most of
Yeah,
them are tied into like real topical issues and like all of them are things that I think we would agree with.
sure.
Like
But at the same time, like, in terms of like, I wouldn't be giving a high poetic talent score to like a song like "Fuck the Police,"
Oh, I want to be clear that I'm
even though it's a
arguing.
message that I would agree with in
Yeah,
that song.
I'm arguing to give him something like a 3.
Yeah, no, I get what you're
That's what
saying.
I am trying to
I
do
I'm
here.
just I'm almost rebuffing the category itself in the moment,
Mm.
because like I feel like we're like,
Doesn't always capture everything we want it to.
as we're gonna be expanding our musical palette here, and our plan is to
Yeah,
continue reaching across the world,
yeah,
we're going to run into this more,
for sure.
where like,
Or just we're gonna hit artists who sing and perform in their own language that we don't
which is
understand.
true, which is going to be a very important
Yeah,
experience for us, because we're going to have to look up lyrics. We kind of
yeah,
did that with Bjork.
right.
We've run into it a couple times, or we did it with Kraftwerk.
Okay.
We did it because Kraftwerk was in
Yeah,
German,
there
wasn't
wasn't.
it?
Yeah, there weren't a ton of lyrics in there,
We're
but
in a ton of lyrics, but I'm just trying to think of artists we have who have performed in their native language.
sure.
That we did we do ABBA?
Yeah. Oh, and to be fair, like Fella does use Yoruba in several of his songs too. Like he
Yeah,
uses a lot of pidgin English mixed with
yeah,
Yoruba, and it'll go back and forth.
yeah. So I mean, just the point that I'm making is like, when we expand past Western style music,
Mhm.
this this
It's
category
tough.
suffers
Yeah,
particularly hard.
it gets way harder for us to do any justice to this whatsoever.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know what
well,
all
it's
that
gonna.
means.
I agree, but it was worth saying because I've been thinking the same thing,
I don't know
especially
what the
with
solution
creating
is,
the
because we
international
need
season.
something. Like because we're comparing.
And here's the other thing, like, because you lose just like a lot of context when you're if you're just looking at translations from if we were looking at like a Japanese artist, it's like, are we picking up on the nuances and the idioms of their language? Are we
That's
picking like
the
you can't really like you
that's
have to
the
have a
tough
really
part of
good
it.
translator, someone who like does, literature or something, go through all the lyrics.
And I think that when we're dissecting like English lyrics, it's it, that's the part that really sings to me. Pardon the
Right.
pun,
So
like the
how do you,
the
right.
idioms and the
So how are you
nuances.
getting that in a language that you don't speak
It's
and
going to
you
be
can
something we
only
have to
barely grasp it
discuss.
literally in a translation?
It's going to be something
Yeah.
we have to discuss because I also like,
It might be a default 5
yeah,
because
but
there's nothing
that's,
else we can do. Or like
yeah,
based on research and what is said about the artists taking, a native speaker's
yeah,
opinions
it's
in.
gonna be an interesting path for us to take.
Mhm,
I am, we gotta figure out here though for Fela.
mhm.
So like I agree because there are lyrics and stuff like that. It can't be the point one.
Oh, no. And because they're definitely deeply meaningful, they have to get something.
Yes, they have to get something, and even though it's not traditional like poetry that we're used to, message and meaning does overwhelm that a little bit. And let's be fair, we've covered some rather blunt
Yeah,
messages in the past,
for
so
sure.
I'm fine with. I think I'm fine with a 3. I had to kind of
Alright.
talk myself into it because
That's
it's
okay.
so different.
Yeah, it's weird for us for
Yeah.
anything. And look, that leaves us with just X Factor, and I think it's something that both of these artists are just clearly also getting. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, minimally for Fela for his invention of a genre of music and Afrobeat, which is a 2-point thing because he's like clearly the guy. He coined the term. Um, we're also probably looking a lot at his politics. I didn't mention it, but he was also like a regular columnist and contributor to certain like opposition newspapers in Nigeria throughout the time that the military government was in power. Like he was majorly influential on the culture, not just in music, um, and on like the historical events and how living in that military dictatorship worked out for a lot of people. Like
Yeah.
um, there's just a lot to his life outside of being extremely influential in music. And I know like Ravi's got obviously the Woodstock point as well
Yes.
as the Beatles influence is still definitely a big part of it. Like, bringing the sitar to Western music. I think we have to be looking at a couple of points for each of them at least.
Yeah. I listen, I agree with you entirely. So let's deal with Fela and then we'll
Okay.
deal with Ravi. Just
Okay.
what number are you thinking for Fela for his contributions for the introduction to Afrobeat music? Creating a style of music
Yeah.
is
That's two.
solid points. That's 2 points off jump.
I think he's got to get at least 3 then.
Yeah, I don't disagree
Right.
with you. I think three makes sense. Are there like awards or recognition to add
Uh,
anything here?
there definitely have been a lot of that. I mentioned they gave him his own Broadway musical. He was actually one of the few artists from around the world who has been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He didn't get in, but he's like one of the only ones who's ever been
I
nominated.
mean,
So I
that's
think
pretty awesome.
that's definitely something worth noting. Um, Other than that, there have been documentaries made about him and his life. Like I said, there was a biopic that was kind of in the works. He's in the Black Music and Entertainment Walk of Fame, but I don't have
All
much
right.
more on that
So,
stuff.
do you think just a 3 then? Is that the point? Are we?
Unless you think it's a little bit more than 3.
I think a 3 fits. I do.
All right, then let's do it.
I think a 3 fits. All
All
right.
right.
So Ravi. I mean, the culture, the influence, the worldwide acclaim that he has been given, becoming synonymous with the instrument, all great stuff.
Mhm.
Just a couple of awards and honors. There's a lot, so I'm not going to go through all of them.
Yeah.
But I did already mention he won the Bharat Ratna, or he was awarded the Bharat Ratna in 1999, which is an incredible achievement.
Yeah, almost think of Fela the same way, except for the differences. Ravi's government actually like recognized
Accepted
his
him, and
greatness,
Fela
and
did not.
Fela's 200 arrests are very
Yeah,
much like the equivalent to me of a Medal of Freedom
yeah.
for the you know
I don't disagree with
situation
you
he
on
was
that
in.
for sure. I really do. I completely agree with what you're saying there. So just moving on a little bit, he was he was awarded the Commander of the Legion of Honor of France in the year 2000, which is wild
Interesting.
stuff. He was an honorary Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to music, so the old KBE.
Right, right.
So we should call him Sir Ravi Shankar.
I
Whatever. I'm
think
not.
so.
Yeah, I think theoretically he would be a Sir.
Hmm.
Moving on from that, so he was nominated for 4 Grammys and a posthumous Grammy after that as well. For the Living Room Sessions Part 2, which was
Okay.
obviously posthumous, but he was nominated for the Living Room Sessions Part 1 as well. He also received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys. He was nominated for an Academy Award for the film Gandhi for his score.
Oh, okay.
Best original score for the film
Yeah,
Gandhi.
Ben Kingsley, famous Indian actor.
Look, I disagree with what was done there, but you're not going to tell me he doesn't look like Gandhi normally. I mean,
Yeah, okay. I
like,
can't argue with that.
that is one of the rare occurrences where like the dude just looked just like him.
Yeah.
Like he looked so much like him.
Yeah, he could pull it off.
I mean, I understand that like just based on the sheer number of people in India, you probably could have found an Indian actor who looked like
Yeah.
Gandhi as well. No, again, not saying it was. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I definitely understand how much Ben Kingsley looks like Gandhi.
He does.
So I already mentioned that he was the first recipient of something called the Tagore Award in recognition for his outstanding contribution to cultural harmony and universal values.
Very nice.
So he was the first recipient of that award. It was posthumous the year after he passed away in 2013 is when he received the award. But I think the coolest little honor and tribute that I want to give to Ravi Shankar, John Coltrane, who was an American saxophonist, or anybody who doesn't know, named his son after Ravi Shankar, named his son Ravi Coltrane, which I just thought was a cool
I didn't know that
thing.
Okay.
So
how
all
many
that to
points?
be said, I mean, I think we're close to that 3.
Sure.
We're close to that 3. The number, unlike Fela, Ravi has the award success.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike Ravi, Fela was nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it's like there's some back and forth there.
Yeah.
And then I think the similarities between these two are pretty crazy.
It's really interesting. Considering how different the music is.
Yeah, if only Fela had been able to live to 92.
I know, right? Well, so what are we gonna go to? You want close to 3, so like a 2.8?
Let's do a 2.8.
Okay, then I have final scores, and we're gonna wrap things up. And winning this week,
I feel like it's wrong to do a guitar here.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Do I just?
Very good. Is Fela Kuti in a close one? Fela with a 38.3 takes the victory.
Wow.
And Ravi with a 36.2. So
okay. I mean, both close. And really what it boils down to, like, the difference is the fact that Fela got points for lyrics.
Yeah. Yep.
It was that close. And that was one of the reasons I was like questioning it at the moment, because I'm like, I know this is going to make the difference in the episode.
Sure, yeah.
And like it's so fucking different from what we consider like the poetic stuff that we've covered in the past. So
yeah,
it's interesting. Both phenomenal.
Yeah, great week. Really enjoyed it. Makes me look forward to the international season a lot more, especially knowing, because like I already knew going into this that I liked both of these artists and that I would enjoy this, and I knew you would appreciate it, but I didn't know if you would like
if I would like it,
really love it the way that I do. So it was a great relief to see.
I mean, listen, I I don't care if I recognize the style of music. If I enjoy listening to something, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And then to compound that with the fact that I, as like a musical person, can recognize how fucking incredibly difficult all of that I was
Mhm.
listening to is to play and write. It's hard not to love. I
It
mean,
is.
it's tough.
Yeah. It was a cool week. But next week, make sure you come back because we're going to compare two guys named James.
Love it.
And that's what that episode's
Will
about.
there be a giant peach involved?
It remains to be seen.
Okay, that's
But
important to know.
the only way you can know is to come back for the next episode. So.
All right. Well, I guess with that being said, y'all. Yeah, fuck Jerry Lee Lewis. Don't even have a great day. Just fuck that guy.
Yeah.
But also, have a great day.
Okay. My dinner has been here for a while, so I think I need
Dude,
to
so
go.
it's fine. And Sydney made salmon tacos and they smell so fucking good.
All right, let's do this.
Out of here, buddy. See ya. All right, y'all. I'm also out of here. Oh, that's strange. It told me Nick rejoined the stream. Wild stuff. Either way, have a wonderful day. Please go my only recommendation, go listen to music that you're not used to listening to. It doesn't have to be Fela Kuti or Ravi Shankar. It doesn't have to be international music. It could just be a genre that you don't normally listen to. My favorite thing about the podcast has been learning about bands and styles of music that I would never have listened to on my own accord and loving. And that's my homework for you. Go listen to something that you don't normally listen to. Goodbye.